And welcome to today's live broadcast, CSPA Microbiology Preservative Subcommittee, supporting and enhancing the microbiological quality of consumer, household, and industrial products, presented by Tony Rook. We are excited to bring you this educational web seminar presented by LabRoots. To learn more about LabRoots, please visit www.labroots.com. I am Rachel Brown of LabRoots, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone that this event is interactive. We encourage you to participate by submitting as many questions as you want at any time you want during the presentation. Just click on the green Q&A button located in the lower left of the presentation window and type your question into the box that appears on the screen. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation. Also, please notice that you will be viewing the presentation in the slide window. To enlarge the window, just click on the screen icon located in the lower right. Finally, if you have trouble seeing or hearing the presentation, please click on the support button at the top right of the presentation window, or use the Q&A button to let us know you're having a problem. Now, I'd like to introduce Tony Rook. Tony Rook leads the Microbiology Resource Center at the Sherwin-Williams Company in Cleveland, Ohio, where he has built a world-class microbiology center of excellence to focus on global preservation strategies, continuous improvement of industrial hygiene practices, and development of microbiological methods to support coating technology applications. Please join me in welcoming Tony. I will now turn the presentation over to him.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate that introduction. So before we begin, I'd like to disclose some CME information. So I do disclose that I have the following financial relationships. I am an employee of the Sherwin-Williams Company. I also sit as the current chair of the Microbiology Preservative Subcommittee within the Consumer Specialty Products Association. I'm also a stock option holder and advisor to LabRoots. So with that, I'd like to open the presentation. That we're going to speak towards the Microbiology Preservative Subcommittee through the Consumer Specialty Products Association. And as Rachel had indicated, we're going to speak towards how this committee is supporting and enhancing the microbiological quality of consumer, household, and industrial products. As she had indicated, I am the R&D manager for the Microbiology Resource Center at Sherwin-Williams, and as we had already disclosed, the chair of the CSPA's Microbiology Preservative Subcommittee. So if we take a look at the agenda today, I will be speaking towards a historical perspective on the microbial control within consumer, household, and industrial products. We'll then speak on the mission as well as the member participation within the Microbiology Preservative Subcommittee. Next, I'll highlight some recent accomplishments of the MPS, and then specifically speak towards a task force that has been commissioned by the MPS to be able to advocate towards preservation stewardship. And then finally, we'll speak towards a few future initiatives of the committee. So if we look at the overview of consumer and household and institutional product preservation, specifically looking at a historical perspective of product susceptibility to microbial spoilage within the industry. Historically, formulations have used conventional chemical preservatives. Historically, the formulations contain high levels of solvent and low water content. This provided some innate capacity in and of itself to resist microbial spoilage. So the historical formulation and conventional preservatives protected products during manufacturing and throughout its lifetime of use by the consumer. So therefore, microbial spoilage historically had been of relatively low concern for the majority of products within this class. As we moved towards more acceptable or equal acceptable components. There's been a trend towards increased microbial spoilage and or susceptibility within consumer products. And if we look at the products themselves, the availability of nutrients within the raw materials allows for microbial contamination and persistence to occur. So the dispersants, surfactants, the defoamers, rheology modifiers, as well as fragrances, all contribute to nutrients that microbial contamination can utilize to survive within these product types. The main source of trending towards increased spoilage can be attributed to the higher level of water activity. As the conventional solvents have fallen out of favor, these solvents have been replaced and reformulated with water, and the water is at a very high water activity and available for utilization by the organisms. Also, many of these products fall within the neutral to alkaline pH range, which makes it susceptible to both bacterial and fungal contamination. Really, the trends towards increased microbial susceptibility is a twofold trend. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see it's being driven by market trends of water-based formulations. So as these formulations are being driven towards the use of more renewable and biodegradable resources, as well as being driven towards trends of removal and reducing of components that are perceived as less sustainable. So the lack of formaldehyde-releasing technologies, the removal of volatile organic compounds, the trend towards 100% APO-free materials, and the trend of low monomer content within polymeric components, as well as the water content of the materials. So it's really driven the trend towards increased microbial susceptibility of products within this industry. On the right hand of the screen, you can see that there's governmental and non-governmental regulatory pressures that are also driving this trend. So here is a snapshot of some of the eco-labeling as well as the governmental organizations that are driving these pressures, from the US EPA to the European Union's BPR and Health Canada. You can see some of the eco-labeling initiatives that are being driven by the governmental organizations, such as the DFE, the Design for the Environment by the EPA, as well as the PMRA's eco-labeling initiative. There's also organizations such as LEED, Green Seal, Green Swan, and Blue Angle that have really driven more sustainable practices within this industry. And towards the middle, you can see the California Air Resource Board has really driven the impact on reduction of VOC within product types. Each of these initiatives have really increased the microbial susceptibility of the products within our industry. So what does this trend towards increased microbial susceptible mean to the products? There's really some real consequences of inadequate wet state preservation that impacts the consumer. Color issues can be impacted, so the appearance of the products can be altered. The products can drift through pH. They can impact both the stability as well as the performance of these products. Microbial metabolism can result in off-gassing and ultimately bulging of the containers, which often can result in recalls of products off the shelf. Again, instability of the product can result from off-gassing. Malodor is probably one of the most identifiable consequences of inadequate preservation. The product just smells of spoilage and can be rejected by the consumer. but also as an indication of microbial metabolism that results in instability of the products. Additionally, viscosity drift can occur that can require result in both instability as well as lack of performance of products. So as we looked at, the subcommittee looked at really the overview of preservation within the consumer, household, and institutional product industry, we really saw a need for industry guidance around these 5 facets of microbiological quality. So the first was understanding and developing guidance for microbiological quality assessments. How do companies that make products in this industry assess the quality of both their raw materials and finished products? The second point of microbiological manufacturing controls and understanding the hygiene requirements of a manufacturer to be able to manufacture products that are susceptible in a non-sterile environment. The third is the microbiological risk assessments. It's really the ownership of the finished product manufacturers to understand their formulations and their processes and develop sound risk assessments to understand the susceptibility of their products to microbial spoilage. And then fourth is really a key cornerstone is understanding preservation. And understanding preservation from really cradle to grave through the initiation of raw materials through the process, through the formulation and compounding of the finished product, filling into your finished product, and then ultimately the shelf life of the product itself. So all those considerations need to be understood to truly understand effective preservation of the finished products. And then finally, staff training. Staff training encompasses the microbiological quality technicians and management, as well as the manufacturing personnel required to be able to handle and manufacture the products. And then finally, a sound understanding of microbiological quality is required by the formulators to be able to formulate effective preservation strategies within their products. So with those needs and understanding those needs, the CSPA Microbiology Preservative Subcommittee was commissioned in late 2008 and really initiated mission statements and agendas throughout 2009. And we've been driving industry guidance and committing to preservation advocacy since that point. So with that said, you may be curious of who the members of this committee are. So the committee members are representatives of CSPA member companies with a focus on microbiology, formulation, and regulation. So the Consumer Specialty Products Association is a trade organization committed to helping member companies drive towards industry guidance and support for regulation initiatives as well. So many of the companies that are part of the CSPA represent marketers, formulators, contract testing labs, as well as preservatives and chemical suppliers. And these are the companies that make up the MPS as well. It's a shared committee of the CSPA's cleaning products and antimicrobial products divisions. And again, we're focused on the consumer and industrial product industry. So I move on to the next slide. I've laid out really the MPS Charter and our mission statement. And the Microbiology Preservative Subcommittee is committed to establishing best practices and acceptable standards to address the increasing concern for microbiological quality within the consumer and industrial products. So as you've seen, the needs that we reviewed, these are those areas that the Microbiology Preservative Subcommittee is committing to addressing. So some of the major challenges created by compliance to green initiatives and the green initiative trends are the increased vulnerability of products to microbial spoilage, have been placed on more emphasis of microbial quality assessment, the effective preservation, as well as the microbial manufacturing controls and practical risk assessments. These green initiative trends have driven constraints on the available, acceptable, and robust preservatives, which have really limited the availability and application of chemical preservatives in the industry today. So with that, the committee has progressed towards industry guidance. And we've really progressed initially with these 3 standards that were issued in 2014. And I apologize, I did misspeak. These are guidelines, so they aren't standards. They're really driven towards trying to provide guidance to the industry. So if you look at the 3-letter acronym as a prefix to each of these guidance documents, you'll notice the acronyms stand. MMG refers to a microbiology method guidance. So anytime the committee is developing guidance of methods, we'll use that acronym. The number is a sequential number of the guidance documents with an iteration. As this is the first iteration of this issuance, it would be .1, and if it's ever revised, obviously that would increase sequentially. And then the year that iterance has been issued would be there. So in 2014, the first iterance of 001, a microbiology method guidance was issued. To look at the microbiology enumeration tests, really provide guidance on how to demonstrate microbial contamination within products and or raw materials within the household and institutional products. The next 2 guidelines, you'll see the prefix is MGG. That refers to a microbiological general guidelines. And the general guidelines were addressed and drafted to focus on the microbiological quality of household and institutional products, as well as draft guidance on quality of raw materials. So each of these 3 guidance have been drafted and issued and are available online at the Consumer Specialty Products Association website. The last 2 guidance guidelines have laid out really the overview concerns and issues for microbiological quality of both finished products and raw material, and also provide recommended specifications for each of those materials. So I'd encourage those that are interested in learning more about these guidance to visit CSPA and download. They are available for purchase. These guidance documents are really set at a moderate cost, similar to what you would expect to pay for an ASTM test method. So as we move into evaluating some of the understanding of the microbiology quality within this industry, in 2010, the CSPA members of the committee decided to survey the industry with directed questions on topics of raw material testing, finished product testing, and manufacturing hygiene. This was published in 2011 in a trade journal. And really the findings demonstrated that microbiological quality testing is common amongst household and institutional product manufacturers. However, the industry guidance wasn't really available. So it was very clear that industry guidance was needed. Even though testing may have completed, there wasn't always consistency among those testing practices. So as we move to the next slide, we had also noticed within that assessment that there was a need for guidance for preservation selection, preservation efficacy test methods, product testing, and as well as quality expectations. So some of the considerations that the MPS looked at to drive towards industry guidance was providing an overview of product preservation and an understanding of the requirements and considerations for product preservation. Selection of preservative-based on product chemistries, so understanding which preservatives should be selected based on the chemistry of the products is critical. Also understanding the fundamentals of preservative efficacy methods and providing guidance to the industry for development of those methods. And then finally, developing acceptance criteria and guidance for the acceptance criteria. So with that regard, a preservative efficacy test method task force was commissioned. And as one of the initial tasks of this preservative efficacy test method task force, it was to survey the industry to more deeply understand what was being conducted in the industry. So the survey directed questions pertaining to key parameters of PET test methods. And the results of that survey were recently published this year in the trade journal HAPI. So the findings were, many companies are employing preservative efficacy test methods, but they are implementing many internal modifications to those methods. So therefore, many variations exist between the methods. However, we did find that there was a core set of similarities between these methods. With that, the clear need for standardized guidance for conducting the PET test methods and developing those methods was seen. So the Preservative Efficacy Test Method Task Force has begun to draft guidance, both general and method guidance, for preservative efficacy testing. Again, these are currently in draft and actively being worked towards. Typically, the task forces meet on a monthly to bi-monthly meeting, and then the MPS meets twice per year at a mid-year meeting in May for the CSPA meeting, and then an annual meeting in December. So the first method is a guidance. It's a general guidelines on the effective preservation of household and industrial products. And this is really, intention is to provide an overview of the considerations of effective preservation. It's important to understand and remember that effective preservation doesn't always have to implement a chemical preservative for effective preservation. Sometimes it can be manufacturing controls and packaging that can have consideration towards effective preservation. The next guidelines, the method guidelines, is focus on the preservative efficacy test method. And really the focus is not to draft a test method per se that you would consider more analogous to an ASTM method, but it's really a guideline to detail the considerations for developing an internal method for preservative efficacy test methods. So because of the wide amount of variation and modifications that we saw in the industry, this method guideline is intended to lay out the method development requirements. I'm going to move on to the Preservation Stewardship Task Force. And this particular task force was commissioned to address the need of communicating the necessity of effective preservation strategies within consumer and industrial products. And the need was really driven by pressure on preservatives today. The trend towards more sustainable and natural raw materials, the restrictive use of conventional preservatives, the continuing trend towards compliance to eco-labeling, for example, the EPA's Design for the Environment, and the continuous ongoing attack of non-governmental organizations on current preservation strategies. And last, the restriction of retailers of preservatives through sustainability programs have put additional pressure on the effective preservative strategies. So therefore, the Preservation Stewardship Task Force continues to drive towards industry guidance. And in response to the trends towards more natural preservatives, a trade journal white paper was issued to lay out the differences between conventional and natural preservatives. It was really initiated by concerns with natural and non-traditional preservatives, looking at the lack of regulatory oversight for natural and preservatives, a lack of ecological and toxicological testing for many of these natural preservatives are really unknown. Many of the conventional preservatives are required through the registration of the Federal Insecticide and Fungicide Rodenticide Act. So toxicological data is required during the registration submission of traditional synthetic preservatives. So therefore, the toxicological evaluation and understanding is clearly known. The potential for supplying quality issues of natural preservatives becomes a real issue. As the natural preservatives are using natural resources, the issues that require from seasonal development and manufacture of these are really unknown. And then the microbicidal efficacy gaps with natural preservatives are really real. Many of these natural preservatives are acid-based, and some of the gaps within alkaline protection are seen. So here on the next slide, I'm showing an example of an eco-labeling compliance recommendation. And this is coming from the EPA's Design for the Environment. This is driven through the safer chemical ingredients. On the left hand of the slide, you can see the DFE has labeled the preservative class in 4 different categories, and I'm showing two categories here. So the left side of the screen shows the chemicals that have been verified to be of low concern based on both experimental and model data. And this is indicated through a green oval. And as you can see, many of these chemistries are acidic-based. Many of them need much higher concentrations for use than within synthetic preservatives. On the right hand of the side of the screen is the next category, and it's the chemicals that have met the DFE's criteria for its functional ingredient class, but that has some hazard profiles. So while they recognize that this is best in class and among the safest for a particular function, the function that's fulfilled by this chemical should be considered for an area for safer chemistry innovation. It's indicated by this yellow triangle. What is of some concern is that many of these preservatives are core preservatives within our industry today. So the isothiazoles, the BIT, your CIT, as well as your MIT products are used effectively within our preservation products today. Also, the phenoxyethanols are effectively used. So as this eco-labeling compliance model had originally been initiated, there was a grandfathering clause of 18 months if your product was on any of these yellow triangle preservatives, and they would need to be grandfathered off and move towards the preservatives of low concern. So therefore, the MPS developed a working group with members of the EPA's Design for the Environment. The working group was commissioned to address the concerns with the initial wording of the DFE Samer Chemistry Initiative, or innovation rather. So the yellow triangle and the grandfathering clause, we really worked closely with members of the DFE and communicated the industry concerns regarding the permitted safer chemical ingredients for this preservative class. We communicated that there was weak activity within the permitted safer chemical ingredients. We communicated that significantly higher concentrations may have to be required, upwards of 20% in the products as compared to traditional actives. And the limited use of alkaline products. So the DFE within this working group provided their insight on their assessment of this preservative class and agreed to be able to work towards understanding and working towards improvement of this eco-labeling. So with that, we worked actively, and we continue to actively work with members of the DFE. DFE attends MPS sessions at the CSPA mid-year meeting, as well as the annual meeting, and offers opportunities for members of both the MPS and members of the DFE to be able to work together towards this goal. So within the goal, a white paper was prepared at the request of the DFE to provide really an overview of preservatives and the preservative class within our products. So we prepared the white paper, Critical Elements of Household and Product Preservation in 2014, and published it within the trade journal. This provided an overview of preservatives, described classification of these preservatives, what is the activity within each of the classifications, and listed the EPA label limits, as well as optimizing preservative performance and understanding good manufacturing practices and the requirements today that are all part of critical elements to be able to ensure household product preservation. So as I move towards the next slide, this is a figure that is taken out of that white paper. And what it shows is the current available preservatives and the effective range of some of the products. So if you look at the gray bars at top, you can see the classes of fabric softeners, all-purpose cleaners, laundry detergents, and dishwashing liquids. So those are arranged on the scale of a pH. And within the pH scale, you can see really the traditional pH ranges for bacterial persistence, anywhere from 4 to 9, and fungi can be anywhere from 3 to 10. But if you look at the dotted line, you can see that manufacturing plants, acclimation of organisms, and organisms that have acclimated to those manufacturing plants can really extend those boundaries. So it's not unheard of to isolate organisms that are able to persist as low as pHs of 2.5 and as high as pHs of 10.5. If we look at the bars below, we can see the organic acids that are within that acceptable green oval, really only available and useful for product types up to pHs of 6. Whereas CMIT and MITs are acceptable throughout a range of pH of 2 to 9. DIT and MIT has a broad spectrum pH capability, and OIT has a broad spectrum range as well. They're color-coded as well to show that the organic acids have microbial efficacy spectrum against both bacteria and fungi, and the CMIT, MIT are effective against both bacteria and fungi, where MIT and DIT are only effective as a bactericide and OIT as a fungicide. So if we look towards removing the yellow triangle class of ingredients, we can really see the gaps that are allowed if only organic acids were permitted. So if we look on the left-hand side of the screen, and you see there's a dotted line that's dividing the pH scale at pH 6. So about half of the dishwashing liquids and the fabric softeners. There are some efficacy gaps for some bacteria for these product types. And the real concern becomes the alkaline range. Efficacy gaps, both the bacteria and fungi, are seen within these product types. And there really isn't an effective strategy for preservation. So by laying out these images and walking the DFE through, they began to understand what those gaps meant. In iterations of their Ecolabeling program, they were able to remove the 18-month grandfathering clause and now continue to allow for the green triangle, but still understand that it's an area for innovation, even if it is the best-in-class preservative for these product types today. So the next slide, I'm going to focus on the retail-driven sustainability programs and some of the initiatives from the Preservation Stewardship, and as we're beginning to advocate for the effective preservation within our products. So these retailer sustainable programs are really impacting preservatives. Some of the aspects of retailer sustainability programs are listed here. They are focused on household and cleaning, personal care products. Some of the larger programs have required online chemical disclosure by January of 2015. And they have partnered with the DFE and the CSPA to be able to help with that online chemical disclosure. Chemical reduction and elimination of some of these sustainability programs have prioritized some of their top chemicals. And at least one of the sustainability programs has prioritized at least 3 out of the 10 of those high priority chemicals to be preservatives. So therefore, you're looking at 30% of those priority chemicals to be removed from the product types. The EPA Design for the Environment labeling is, again, supporting some of these programs, and sustainable indexes for ingredients are contributing. So the Preservation Stewardship Task Force goals are really to communicate to stakeholders that we've identified as regulators, non-governmental organizations, retailers, and consumers, our position on the necessity for responsible use of preservatives within our industry and our products through a holistic approach of product preservation. So again, speaking towards the cradle to grave and understanding the development of the formulation, the manufacturing controls within the product manufacturing, the compounding, filling, and shelf life and use of the products as well are all considered to be able to develop a holistic approach of product preservation. We've drafted a position paper. This position paper is still currently in draft, but there's really 2 main points of that position. Really, the first point is that CSPA member companies depend on preservatives for protection of consumer industrial products to protect from microbial spoilage. This contamination may lead to breakdown of products and compromise product performance, as I have already highlighted. CSPA members also recognize that preservatives have a positive impact on the overall sustainability of products and processes. Prevention of spoilage is beneficial to the consumer economically and results in a positive impact on sustainability by preventing premature disposal of consumer products that have become spoiled. So the CSPA Preservative Subcommittee is committed to drafting industry guidance by developing microbiological quality best practices and standards for the manufacturing of consumer and household products, we continue to develop and execute strategies of preservation stewardship and advocacy. So I hope today to have given you an overview of what is the mission and some of the trends towards guidance that this subcommittee has been drafting. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Rachel and open it up for any questions that the audience may have. Rachel?
Thank you for that presentation, Tony. It's time for Q&A. So if you have any questions you'd like to ask, please do so now. Just click on the green Q&A button at the lower left of the presentation window. Type your question into the box that appears on your screen and click on the send button. We'll try to answer as many questions as we have time for. So I'll give you guys a few minutes to submit your questions. I don't see any in the queue for right now. I guess, Tony, do you have any final words before we wrap up this presentation?
Yeah, Rachel, if I look back at really the mission of the Microbiology Preservative Subcommittee, I really am trying to bring awareness of what is the goals that this committee is interested in driving guidance and the best practices of consumer and household industrial standards. So it's really a twofold mission of driving guidance as well as a sound commitment to advocating preservation stewardship for our products. We really see it as a increased need to be able to communicate, as there's a lot of voices on the opposing side for putting pressures on our current preservation strategies. And there's very little preservatives that are around to be able to replace the current strategies. So therefore, we see it as a major initiative to be able to bring awareness to the initiatives of this task force.
Great. Thank you once again, Tony. I would also like to thank our sponsor, LabRoots, for making today's educational webcast possible. Before we go, I want to let everyone know that today's webcast will be available for on-demand viewing through February 2016. You will receive an email from LabRoots letting you know when this webcast will be available for replay. Please share that announcement with your colleagues who may have missed today's live event. That's all for now. Thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again soon.